Thanks for joining us today on this edition of Business Daily. I'm Lee Ji-eun in Seoul. We have plenty of stories lined up for you today, so let's get started with a look at the day's highlights. As part of its efforts to revitalize the Korean economy, the government outlines the details of its tax code revision proposal. Is Korea increasingly becoming a victim of growing trade protectionist sentiment worldwide? We'll sit down with an expert to talk about why we're seeing a surge in related measures and how it will affect the Korean economy. Just days after the government submitted a supplementary budget bill to the National Assembly aimed at creating jobs and reducing the risks of corporate restructuring, it has rolled out a proposal to revise the country's tax code. Our Kim Min-ji has the details.
Propping up the economy and providing more stability for the public. These are the main pillars of the government's tax code revision proposal.
Korea faces uncertainties at home and abroad, from slowing exports to a contraction in investment to concerns about Brexit. To strengthen the economy and boost job creation, we feel it's time for the active implementation of fiscal measures.
To do so, the government first plans to foster future growth engines by offering up to 30% in tax credits for companies involved in research and development in 11 new growth industries, such as biohealth, robotics, and future cars. To encourage employment, the government looks to offer tax benefits for hiring and investment in all services, including sports services providers and cafes, which were previously left out. The revised tax code also proposes tax benefits for troubled companies that voluntarily undergo corporate restructuring. As part of its efforts to give Korean households a boost, the revision seeks an extension of tax deductions for credit card spending until 2019, with the amount deducted changing depending on people's income levels. Tax support is also offered for families that have babies as the country faces a chronically low birth rate. On top of that, the revision aims to improve fair taxation in the system and transparency by increasing capital gains taxes and offering benefits for firms that boost wages and investment. Through these changes, which would take effect next year if approved, the government is expecting to raise the tax revenue by roughly $280 million annually.
Like in the past, the revision is focused on stimulating the economy, so it will help to a certain extent. But in the past few years, Korea has seen a slump in corporate investment, consumption, and exports, and the revision doesn't really include groundbreaking changes that would improve these conditions.
The government's proposal comes about a month after it announced a stimulus package to speed up growth. But experts say the impact will be minuscule unless these efforts are coupled with measures to bolster the competitiveness of companies and corporate investment. Another concern is a separate bill looking to raise corporate taxes pending at the National Assembly, as opponents say a heavier tax burden on companies could cancel out the expected benefits of the proposed tax revision. Kim Min-ji, Business Daily.
Korean tech giant Samsung Electronics has seen its quarterly operating profit rise to a two-year high, largely propelled by stellar sales in its smartphone division. Will the Korean company be able to keep its upward trend in the latter half of the year? Our Shin Se-min has more.
Samsung Electronics has released its forecast-beating earnings report, which shows its operating profit in the April to June period jumped 18% from a year before to 8.1 trillion won, or $7.17 billion. Sales rose 5% to $45 billion, slightly higher than its earnings guidance, while its net income rose 2% from a year earlier. Considering that Samsung's mobile division accounts for more than half of its revenue and profit, the recent popularity of its Galaxy S7 smartphone and mid to low-end product lineup have played a key part in boosting its stance in the world's already saturated smartphone market. The division reported operating profit of $3.8 billion, and industry trackers project that the Korean company has sold some 26 million units of the newly released smartphone since it hit shelves in March. This is in stark contrast to its rival Apple, which reported a 15% drop in quarterly sales due to slowing demand for the iPhone. Given these circumstances, industry watchers believe the tech company will be able to put out yet another handsome earnings report in the latter half of the year. The launch of its Galaxy Note 7, the latest version of its large-screen flagship smartphone, set for release next week, is aimed at extending the company's improved performance. Not only that, prospects for some of its other key divisions also look promising.
The earnings pickup in the company's consumer electronics division is likely to continue through the end of the year, and the company is expected to maintain solid sales in its display panels and semiconductors.
All things considered, the company is confident that it will continue its upward trend in the second half of the year, with an earnings bump in the component business due to sales growth in high value-added products. Shin Se-min, Business Daily.
And staying with tech firm report cards, LG Electronics said its second quarter operating profit jumped to 139.5% on year, boosted by brisk sales of home appliances and display panels. During the April to June period, Korea's second largest electronics maker earned over 584 billion won, or about $519.6 million in operating profit. Its sales grew slightly more than 0.5% compared to the same period last year, but the firm's mobile business division continued to suffer, posting $136 million in operating losses for the fifth straight quarter as sales of its flagship G5 underperformed. And as widely expected, the U.S. Federal Reserve held fire and left interest rates unchanged. But it did leave the door open for a rate hike later this year, as it believed near-term risks to the economic outlook have diminished. In a statement Wednesday, following its policy-setting meeting overnight, the Federal Open Market Committee kept its benchmark interest rate in the 0.25 to 0.5% range. The U.S. Central Bank said the economy had expanded at a moderate rate and job gains were strong in June. Analysts say the global slowdown, financial market volatility, and uncertainty over the impact of Brexit have repeatedly prompted the Fed to hold fire. There are 3 more Fed policy meetings this year, but experts don't expect a rate hike at the November meeting because as it comes a week ahead of the U.S. presidential election. And the government has pulled the final plug on leading mobile carrier SK Telecom's bid to buy top cable TV operator CJ HelloVision. The Ministry of Science, ICT and Future Planning, which was heading the evaluation of what would have been one of the country's biggest M&As this year, made this announcement on Thursday. It follows the country's antitrust watchdog's decision last week to reject the bid due to monopoly concerns. And the merger required approval from 3 government bodies, including the Fair Trade Commission. And given the FTC's ruling, the Science Ministry's decision did not come as a surprise. Are countries around the world increasingly resorting to trade protectionism amid slowing growth in the global economy? Recent anti-dumping duties slapped on Korea have put the country's policymakers and businesses on alert as they worry about a resurgence in protectionism. Take a look.
The Chinese government recently announced it will levy anti-dumping duties of 37.3% to 46.3% on grain-oriented electrical steel products from Korea, Japan, and the EU. Grain-oriented electrical steel is a core material used in making transformers or motors and is 3 to 4 times more expensive than general steel plates. The United States has also decided to impose anti-dumping duties of up to 48% on imports of corrosion-resistant steel from Korea, saying that related U.S. industries are being hurt by products that are sold under fair value. This comes after an earlier decision to levy preliminary anti-dumping tariffs of 111% and 49% on washing machines produced in China by Samsung Electronics and LG Electronics. In fact, numbers show that a surge in protectionist measures has led to a rise in the number of anti-dumping cases involving Korean exports, posing a growing risk to the Korean economy as well as businesses already struggling with faltering exports.
And to tell us more about this, we have Professor Kim Se-wan from Ewha Women's University joining us in the studio today. Welcome to the program.
Pleasure to be here.
All right, so why should we be worried that more countries are resorting to trade protectionism measures, and what are some reasons behind this growing trend?
Well, protectionism is a theme of the government policies that impose tariffs and non-tariff restrictions on imported goods and services for protecting domestic industries. Actually, for last decades, protectionism was forgotten words thanks to strong movements of the internationalization, globalization, and free trade. But as we have seen from Brexit and Sanders and Trump, it just came back.
Now, why are we then seeing this protectionism surge worldwide right now?
Well, it is very interesting, actually, that protectionism is coming out from rich countries like UK and US. I see two major reasons behind this. The first is unfair income distribution for the last decades. UK and US are well known for unfair income distribution compared to any countries in the world. So the people who did not much benefited from internationalization and free trade became very angry. And second reason is there was long recession, so no policy is working. So, for example, expansionary monetary and fiscal policies are not effective at all, and government and people are searching a scapegoat of the difficult situations, which is foreign countries.
All right, then exports, considering that exports make up a massive part of the Korean economy, so if these exporters are hit, then what extent of damage are we looking at?
Well, as we know, Korea is the most foreign-dependent country in the world.
Right.
If we add up export and imports or trade of the nation, that covers almost 83% of the GDP. And at the same time, Korea is seventh largest trader in the world. So, for example, Hyundai Motor, a major company in Korea, is producing 8 million automobiles every year. But domestic demand is only 1.6 million automobiles. So without export, and if there is a problem in export, there will be a big problem to the company and the nation as a whole.
Now, there's World Trade Organization, which fights protectionism in a number of ways, and also Korea has a lot of free trade agreements in place. So I'm wondering at this point, how exactly are other countries charging Korea with these anti-dumping duties?
Well, U.S. and China can make their complaints against Korea without a legal basis.
Okay.
The dumping itself is illegal according to WTO. So, but the problem is the investigations by WTO again about the dumping takes a long time, over 3 years. And meanwhile, Korean export companies will lose their opportunities of the export.
Now, and of course, concerns are rising over the upcoming presidential election over in the U.S.
Right.
Because right now, looking at it, both candidates, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, have their focus on protective trade,
Right.
saying that they're open to re-examining all the trade agreements that the U.S. has in place, the one including with Korea. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, whoever wins the next U.S. presidential election, it is very clear that U.S. government's trade policy will be more biased to protectionism. So the largest issue related to protectionism of the United States is renegotiating FTA. And related to that, there will be more issues of the dumping, particularly in the industries of electronics, chemicals, and steel industries.
So do you think we're going to see this sentiment continue to rise worldwide?
Well, as I talked about before, in terms of the income distribution fairly, protectionism is a kind of politically generated issue. So if people figures out the importance of the free trade for further economic growth, the protectionism will be disappeared. Americans, I believe, know that without free trade, they can have General Electric, IBM, Google, and Microsoft.
Let's come back to Korea then. I mean, Korea said it's stepping up its efforts to, I guess, fight against the rising protectionist measures. What are some of the ways that Korea is planning to do that? And do you think these measures that Korea has come up with is enough?
Well, since protection is out of country issues, there is no direct solution to protectionism. Instead, it is said that Korean government will provide something consulting on exporting difficulties, and they will regenerate the general trading companies for promoting export to the nation, foreign countries. But I believe that Korean government should give more efforts to stop the protectionism. They need to give more efforts through WTO system and RCEP and TPP and FTAs.
So engage more with multinational organizations. All right. Thank you so much for your insight today, Professor.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the end, but we'll be back tomorrow with more business news that matters to you. So don't forget to tune in then. Thanks for watching, and goodbye.